Michael Anderson, a composed, charismatic CEO known for transforming online education across North Carolina. Today, he's not in the boardroom. He's standing in front of a brand new elementary school funded by his own foundation. The air is warm, filled with the sound of cheering children. News cameras click. Local officials clap. He steps forward to cut the ribbon, when a small voice breaks the rhythm. "Daddy!" Everything stops. A young girl, no more than 8, in a school uniform, her finger pointed right at him. Her cheeks flush, but her voice doesn't shake. "Mom said, my dad would look just like you." Michael freezes. The crowd whispers. His past rushes back. Who is this child? And why does she carry a pendant engraved with M plus G equals E? The girl's mother, Grace, a former employee who vanished from his company years ago. He remembers now, a retreat, a fleeting moment, a goodbye left unexplained. As Michael searches for answers, he finds himself drawn into the life of a little girl who speaks like him, laughs like him, and slowly begins to heal something in him. But when his past comes roaring back, a former fiancé threatening to ruin everything, Michael is faced with a choice: guard his legacy or step into the unknown as a father. This isn't just a story about a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It's about the one word that changed everything. Hit subscribe now, because some stories aren't just watched, they're felt. The sun had barely burned through the morning mist when Michael Anderson stepped out of his town car. Dressed in a tailored gray suit with a sky-blue pocket square, he looked every bit the self-made millionaire. Calm, composed, detached. Around him, streamers fluttered in the warm breeze, and a large banner above the school's entrance read, "Welcome to Anderson Learning Academy." Michael nodded politely to the principal, the mayor, and a line of photographers. This ribbon-cutting ceremony was supposed to be quick. A photo op, a handshake, a few words of inspiration for a low-income community he'd quietly funded. Another checkmark on his list of social responsibility wins. What he didn't expect, what no one could have prepared him for, was the small voice that pierced the air. "Daddy!" The word landed like thunder in his chest. Michael froze mid-step. He turned slowly, searching the faces of the neatly lined-up children in their bright uniforms. His gaze locked onto a girl near the center, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with tight brown curls, wide hazel eyes, and a backpack covered in stickers. Her cheeks flushed red, but she didn't back down. She pointed directly at him. "You look just like the picture my mom showed me," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Laughter rippled through the crowd at first. Nervous, unsure, but the whispers started just seconds later. Parents glanced at each other. The principal looked horrified. Michael's mind spun. He forced a tight smile, waved lightly, and walked toward the podium, heart pounding beneath his crisp dress shirt. He spoke, though he barely remembered the words. Something about opportunity, about building futures. Applause followed, polite and brief, but even as the ribbon was cut and cameras clicked, he could feel her eyes on him. When the ceremony ended, he moved toward the parking lot, hoping to slip away before the questions started. But the girl was there again, standing beside her teacher, clutching something in her small hands, a silver chain, maybe, a locket. Michael looked to the teacher. "She asked to give you this. I wasn't sure, but—" She insisted. The girl stepped forward, her lips pressed together like she was holding back a million things. She held out the pendant. It was simple, worn, and engraved with 3 small letters. M plus G isitsu si. Michael's breath caught. His eyes snapped up. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Eliza," she whispered. "Eliza Grace." He stared at her, the name crashing into his memory like a wave. Grace. Grace Bennett. a content writer from his company years ago. They had shared a retreat in Charleston, a brief, quiet romance that ended without closure. She had resigned not long after, no explanation. Now, here was this little girl, standing in front of him with her mother's eyes, and possibly his name hidden in her initials. He turned slowly, the weight of the moment anchoring his steps. In the silence of the car, as the driver pulled away from the school, Michael couldn't hear the ribbon fluttering. He couldn't feel the pride of building a school. He could only hear one word, trembling, insistent, unforgettable. Daddy. Michael didn't go straight back to his office that day. Instead, he sat in the back of his car, the engine humming softly, staring at the tiny silver locket Eliza had handed him. It rested in his palm like something ancient, fragile, and sacred. The initials engraved on it, M plus G equals E, kept echoing in his mind over and over like a heartbeat he hadn't realized he missed. Grace, he whispered under his breath. That name, that moment, it wasn't just a memory. It was a door, and Eliza had just opened it. Back then, Grace Bennett had been sharp, thoughtful, and quietly brilliant. She joined the content team during a company retreat in Charleston. It was a beautiful weekend. Workshops during the day, warm lights and wine in the evenings. One night, after hours of talking by the fireplace, they had shared something fleeting but honest. But then she left. No note, no phone call, just a resignation email and silence. Michael had assumed it was nothing more than a brief spark that burned out. He had moved on, or so he thought, until today. He tapped his driver's shoulder. Take me to the office, and get me everything you can on a Grace Bennett who used to work for us. I need HR records, old addresses, anything. His voice cracked near the end. The driver didn't ask questions. He just nodded. 2 hours later, Michael sat alone in his corner office, the city of Charlotte glowing behind him through tall glass windows. His assistant, Maria, gently knocked and entered, placing a manila folder on his desk. I found a few records. Her file was closed, but HR still had a backup, she said softly. She worked in the content team from 2013 to 2015, resigned suddenly. No forwarding address. Michael flipped through the papers, his fingers trembling just slightly. There was her onboarding form, her emergency contact, listed as her sister, no number, a scanned photo ID, and then a company retreat roster with her name highlighted. He leaned back, sighing deeply. Eliza's 8, he murmured. Maria tilted her head. She's 8, he repeated, more to himself than to her. That retreat was 9 years ago. Maria's eyes widened and she stepped back, letting the weight of the truth settle. Michael barely slept that night. He stared at the ceiling of his penthouse condo, replaying every detail from Charleston, every smile Grace gave, every shared joke, the way her eyes softened when she talked about wanting a family someday, the way she disappeared. Was it because of him? Had she left because she found out she was pregnant? Because she knew he was preparing for an engagement that never actually happened? Or had she just wanted to protect the child from a man who barely knew how to be present? The next morning, he walked into the office early and made one call he hadn't expected to ever make. Find her, he told a private investigator. Grace Bennett. She might be in North Carolina. She has a daughter named Eliza, around 8 years old. I need to know where she is. The man on the other end asked for time, and Michael gave it. He had waited 8 years. A few more days wouldn't break him now. Later that week, his phone buzzed with a text from the PI. Found her. Works part-time at a local bookstore. Lives in a modest neighborhood with her daughter. No criminal record. Clean background. Michael didn't reply. He just read the message again and again. That afternoon, he found himself parked outside a small corner bookstore in South Charlotte. Through the window, he saw her, Grace. She looked almost exactly the same. A little older, maybe. Tired, but graceful in the way she moved behind the register, checking books, smiling gently at customers. Her hair was tied up, strands falling loosely around her face. She wore a faded cardigan and jeans, nothing like the sleek dresses from her corporate days. Michael didn't get out. He just watched, torn between guilt and fear. She had built something, quietly, without him. What right did he have now? But when he saw Eliza walk in, her backpack bouncing and her hand clutching a rolled-up drawing, his heart squeezed. Grace turned, knelt, and hugged her. Michael's throat tightened. He pressed a hand to the steering wheel and whispered, "She called me Daddy." And, for the first time in years, Michael Anderson didn't feel like a CEO. He didn't feel powerful or important. He just felt lost, and maybe, just maybe, found. Stay with us. In the next part, the truth begins to unfold, not just about the past, but what it means for their future. Make sure you subscribe, because you won't want to miss what happens when Michael steps out of the car and back into Grace's world. Michael stood outside the bookstore for nearly half an hour, frozen in the quiet chaos of his own thoughts. Through the glass, he watched Grace tidy a shelf, greet a customer, then crouch to help Eliza with her backpack. There was something heartbreakingly gentle about the way she moved, like time had softened her, but hadn't dulled the sharp strength beneath her calm. He exhaled slowly and finally opened the door. The little chime above rang softly as he stepped in. Grace didn't look up right away, but when she did, her smile faltered. Her hand froze midair, her lips parted just slightly, and her eyes, those deep, steady eyes, they didn't flash with anger or surprise. They filled with something else entirely. Recognition and guilt. "Michael," she whispered. He stepped forward, voice quiet but certain. "Hi, Grace." A beat of silence passed between them. Eliza looked up from the children's corner, saw Michael, and smiled with a kind of innocent joy that felt both heartwarming and devastating. "You came," she said brightly, before darting back to her coloring book. Grace swallowed hard and motioned toward the back room. "Can we talk privately?" He nodded. They walked through a short hallway into a staff break room, barely big enough for a table and 2 chairs. Grace shut the door gently behind them. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I didn't expect this," she said, voice low and tense. "I didn't expect you to show up. I didn't expect Eliza," he replied, eyes locked on hers. "Or the locket, or the look on your face when she called me Daddy." Grace closed her eyes, breathed in deeply, then sat down. "I was going to tell you, 1,000 times, but every time I almost picked up the phone. Something stopped me." "Like what?" he asked softly. She looked up, tears threatening but not falling. "Like the fact that you were preparing to get married back then. Like the fact that I was just another face in a long line of corporate teams. Like... Maybe it was easier to believe she'd be safer without your world touching hers." Michael sat across from her, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were never just another face to me." Grace laughed, quietly and bitterly. "Then why didn't you ever reach out?" "I didn't know," he said simply. "You left without a word." "Because I was scared, Michael," she said, finally letting the emotion rise in her voice. "Scared of what it would mean for her. For me, and maybe for you, too." The room grew still. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You should have told me. I could have helped. I would have helped." Grace looked away, her voice soft. "I didn't want your help, out of obligation." Michael's chest tightened. "It wouldn't have been. A long pause stretched between them. Then, quietly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn envelope. She slid it across the table. "I wrote this a year ago," she said. "I never mailed it. But maybe you should read it now." He opened it slowly. Her handwriting was careful, each line filled with raw honesty. She'd written about the retreat, the pregnancy, the fear, the love, and how Eliza had grown up asking questions, always wondering why her father didn't show up to birthday parties or read her bedtime stories. When he reached the last sentence, his hands trembled. "She doesn't know your name, but sometimes, when she draws her family, she leaves a blank face next to hers, hoping one day it'll be you." Michael looked up, eyes wet, voice cracked. "Does she know who I am?" Grace shook her head. "No, not really. She just guessed. Today wasn't planned. I swear it." He nodded slowly, every part of him unraveling. "I want to know her, not just as some donor who funds schools. I want to know her as her father." Grace studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since he walked in, she smiled. Faintly, sadly, but genuinely. "She deserves the truth," she said, "but it has to come from both of us." He nodded again, this time with purpose. "Then let's do it, together." Michael walked slowly beside Grace as they stepped back into the bookstore. The bell above the door chimed again, softer this time, as if the building itself recognized the shift between them. Outside, the sun had started to break through the clouds, spilling thin gold streaks across the front windows. It was warm, but Michael's chest still felt tight. Eliza sat on the carpet near the front, surrounded by picture books, her legs crossed and her ponytail bouncing gently with each word she read aloud to herself. Michael's voice caught slightly as he asked, "Can I sit with her?" Grace hesitated, but then she nodded, her voice barely audible. "Just follow her lead." He knelt beside Eliza, careful not to disturb the circle of her small world. She looked up, curious. "You came back?" she said softly. "I did," he replied, smiling gently. "I told you I would." Eliza tilted her head. "Most grown-ups don't come back. Mom says it's not always their fault, but it still hurts sometimes." Michael's heart squeezed. "You're right. It does hurt. But I want to be different, Eliza." She blinked at him, then slowly reached into her backpack and pulled out a tiny velvet pouch. "This is for you." He opened it carefully. Inside was the locket, the same one she'd handed him at the school, engraved with delicate gold letters. M+G Asososogos E. He swallowed hard. "Where did you get this?" Eliza shrugged. "Mom had it in her jewelry box. I found it when I was 6. She let me keep it after I promised not to lose it. I used to pretend it was a secret code." Michael turned the locket over in his hand, running his thumb over the engraving. It was small, but unmistakable, a piece of the past preserved in metal. "Did she tell you what it means?" he asked gently. Eliza said, hesitated, then nodded slowly. "She said it was initials, for 3 people who were once really close, but not anymore." Michael looked into her eyes. "Would you want them to be close again?" The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for her coloring book, flipping to a page where she'd drawn 3 stick figures. 1 tall man, 1 woman with curly hair, and a little girl in between. Above them, she had scribbled in purple crayon, "Maybe someday." Michael's voice cracked as he whispered, "That day could be soon." Eliza looked up again, searching his face. "Are you my dad?" The question hung in the air, heavy and delicate all at once. Grace stepped forward slowly. She knelt beside her daughter, placing a hand gently on her back. "Eliza," she said softly, "remember how I always told you that your dad was someone kind, someone I cared about a lot?" Eliza nodded. "Well, Grace continued, her voice thick with emotion. "You were right about the man at the school. His name is Michael. And yes, baby, he's your dad." Eliza's eyes widened. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She simply stood, walked over to Michael and hugged him, tightly. Like she'd been waiting for this moment longer than she even realized. Michael wrapped his arms around her carefully, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held on too tight. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I didn't know, but now I do, and I'm not going anywhere." Grace wiped away tears silently. She sat down beside them, and for the first time in years, the three of them shared something that almost felt like a beginning. Later that afternoon, Michael took them to a nearby park. Eliza laughed as she pushed herself on the swing, her feet kicking toward the sky, her voice echoing between the trees. Michael and Grace sat on a bench watching her. The silence between them was no longer strained. It was thoughtful. "She's incredible," Michael said quietly. "She is," Grace agreed. "All her life she's been curious, brave. She loves puzzles, especially the kind with missing pieces." He smiled softly. "So do I." Grace turned to him, cautious but open. "Michael, if you really want to be in her life, this won't be easy. There will be questions, legal things, emotional things." "I know," he said sincerely. "But I'm ready. For her, for both of you." She nodded slowly, tears forming again. "Then we start here." As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft peach and violet hues, Eliza ran up to them, breathless and grinning. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. Michael laughed, standing. "Only if I get the biggest scoop." Eliza giggled. "Deal." Grace smiled, rising beside them, and as the three walked down the path together, their shadows intertwined on the sidewalk. Not just three people, but a family beginning to form. The days that followed were nothing short of miraculous. Michael found himself leaning into a life he'd never imagined. A life where bedtime stories mattered more than board meetings, where questions like, "What's your favorite dinosaur?" took precedence over sales forecasts. He learned Eliza liked her pancakes shaped like stars. She couldn't stand itchy sweaters. And she had a deep, sincere belief that kindness could fix almost anything. Each evening they built puzzles or read by lamplight. Grace, cautiously but earnestly, began letting him in, helping him understand the years he missed, the birthdays he never attended, the drawings Eliza once left on an empty chair beside her bed. Then, just as the quiet started to feel like peace, the storm came. It arrived in the form of an envelope, hand-delivered, stiff with weight and cold professionalism. Grace found it first, tucked beneath the doormat. She held it like it burned. Michael opened it, eyes narrowing as he read. His heart dropped. A formal letter from his former fiancée's legal team. The message was clear. "If you go public with this child, we will expose the past, the affair, the timing, the paternity question. We will destroy your name, your company, and everything you've built." Grace's face paled as she sank into the couch. "This is about her, isn't it? The one you almost married?" Michael didn't deny it. "Madeline. Her family runs a media conglomerate. She always warned me that scandals would kill perception, and she holds grudges like swords." Grace shook her head. "This isn't fair. You've done nothing wrong." Michael folded the letter with trembling hands. "Except? I didn't know. I didn't protect you. And now, you and Eliza could pay for my silence." "No," Grace said firmly, standing. "We're not playing her game. Eliza deserves the truth. She deserves to be claimed, not hidden." Eliza peeked around the corner just then, holding a stuffed bear by the ear. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Grace swallowed. Michael knelt beside Eliza and took her small hand in his. "Nothing's wrong, sweetie. Just grown-up stuff. But we're okay. I promise." Eliza looked up at him, studying his face with disarming calm. "You look sad, Daddy," they could. Word still stunned him. Every single time. "I'm just worried about keeping you safe," he whispered. She nodded, then wrapped her arms around his neck. "You already do." Michael hugged her tightly. In that moment, all the fear inside him turned to fire. He wasn't going to let anyone use fear to erase this gift. Not again. That night, he called his lawyer. "We're going public," he said. "Prepare a statement. I'm acknowledging my daughter. If they want a war, we'll bring truth instead of silence." The lawyer tried to warn him. "Michael, this could cost you partnerships, investors, maybe your board seat." "Let it," he said, his voice steady. "I've spent years building things. This time, I'm building someone." When he hung up, Grace was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes glassy. "You sure about this?" He nodded. "I didn't come this far to run." The next morning, they went to the school again. Not to cut ribbons, not to pose for photos, but just to walk the halls. Eliza clung to his hand, proudly introducing him to her classmates. "This is my dad," she told one teacher with a wide smile. "He's learning how to color inside the lines." Michael laughed, feeling something loosen in his chest, something that had been bound for years. But peace didn't last long. Later that afternoon, the press found them. A camera crew showed up outside the bookstore. Questions flew like arrows. "Is this your child? Was she born during your engagement to Madeline Cross? Do you intend to resign from your company?" Michael didn't hide. He stepped in front of the bookstore window, looked into the lens, and said with quiet conviction, "This is Eliza. She is my daughter. I wasn't there when she was born, but I'm here now, and nothing matters more to me than earning my place in her life. Whatever that costs me, I'm ready to pay it." The video went viral within hours. Some praised his honesty, others questioned his timing, but for Eliza, the moment was everything. That night, as she watched the video with wide, shining eyes, she turned to Grace and asked, "Does this mean Daddy picked us?" Grace smiled, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Yes, baby. He chose us, and now the world knows." Outside, the storm had passed. But inside, a new kind of strength had taken root. The media storm didn't die down overnight. In fact, it only grew. By the end of the week, Michael Anderson's name was splashed across headlines, news tickers, and even late-night monologues. Most framed it as a scandal. Some called it brave. But the only opinions that mattered to him now lived under the same roof. At home, Eliza continued drawing pictures of her new family. Crayons scattered across the kitchen table, every page filled with bright skies and giant smiling faces. In each one, her hand always reached for Michael's. And yet, there was a weight still hanging between Grace and him, something unspoken, something unfinished. One evening, after Eliza fell asleep mid-sentence with her favorite book open on her chest, Grace lingered at the dining room table. She looked tired, not just physically, but deep in her bones. The kind of tired you don't fix with sleep. Michael sat across from her in silence until she finally reached into her purse and placed something carefully on the table. It was a necklace, a delicate silver chain. On the pendant were 3 etched letters, M plus G equals E. His breath caught. "I didn't want to do this like a dramatic reveal," Grace said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "But Eliza gave this to me earlier today. She said she found it in her memory box. I'd forgotten she still had it." Michael picked up the necklace slowly, reverently. "I remember when we made this. That company at the retreat. Personalized keepsakes. You joked it was cheesy, but you still wore it." "I wore it every day," she whispered. "Even after you left. Even after I found out I was pregnant." He looked up at her, stunned. I thought you didn't tell me because you were ashamed," he said. "Because I was engaged. Because it was too complicated." Grace shook her head. "I didn't tell you because I overheard you that day, on the phone, saying your future couldn't afford any surprises, that everything had to stay on track." Michael closed his eyes slowly, the memory flooding back. A call with a board member. Frustrated. Dismissive. "I don't need drama right now. Everything's finally in place." He'd meant business drama, but Grace had heard something else entirely. "I wasn't trying to punish you," she said gently. "I just didn't think you'd want the detour, so I raised her on my own, until now." A long silence fell. "I wish I could go back and change what I said," Michael murmured, "but I can't. All I can do now is show you that I'm not that man anymore." Grace nodded slowly, her eyes misty. "No, I see it. Every time you tuck her in, every time you listen without checking your watch." Michael looked down at the necklace in his hand. "What do I do with this now?" he asked quietly. Grace gave a small smile. "You keep it, because it was true then, and it's still true now." That night, Michael sat alone in Eliza's room while she slept. He gently placed the necklace on her nightstand. Then he picked up one of her drawings, this one showing the three of them standing under a tree, with the words, "My family loves me." Tears welled in his eyes. In the morning, Michael made a decision. He called a meeting with his board, every member, in person. They gathered in the conference room overlooking downtown Raleigh. Suits, ties, tight lips, and wary eyes. Michael stood at the head of the table and took a breath. "I know what some of you are thinking," he began, "that I've compromised the company's image, that I've invited scrutiny we didn't need." He looked around the table, steady and calm. "But this company was founded on values, growth, learning, and truth. I've spent years teaching kids around the country that knowledge is power, that honesty matters, that they should be proud of who they are. So how can I look my daughter in the eyes and pretend she's a problem to hide?" The room was silent. "I'm not stepping down," he said firmly. "In fact, I'm launching something new, a scholarship, for children in underserved communities. It'll be named after Eliza, because one word from her changed everything." One board member cleared her throat. "And what about the Cross family's media threat?" Michael didn't flinch. "Let them come," he replied. "They have stories. I have the truth." Later that evening, back at home, Eliza burst into the room waving her backpack. "Daddy, guess what? I'm going to be in the spelling bee next week." He grinned and scooped her up. "Then we've got some practicing to do, Miss Champion." Grace watched them from the doorway, her heart full, and quietly, finally, at peace. It was just past sunset when the knock came. Michael had just finished rinsing dishes in the kitchen while Eliza sat curled up on the living room rug, humming softly as she colored another picture. Grace was upstairs folding laundry, and for the first time in days, the house felt still, peaceful, but the knock shattered that calm. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Not the kind of knock from a neighbor, not the kind of knock from someone excited to see you. Michael dried his hands, crossed the hall, and opened the door. Standing there, in a tailored gray coat and a look that could slice glass, was Caroline Cross. "Hello, Michael," she said, her tone as smooth as ever but dripping with tension. "We need to talk." He stepped outside and gently closed the door behind him. "What are you doing here?" he asked, keeping his voice low and steady. "I could ask you the same," she replied, glancing toward the house. "I saw the press conference. Cute little speech about truth and redemption. The world's eating it up. but I know better." Michael took a slow breath. "This isn't the place, Caroline." "Oh, I think it is," she said firmly. "Because if you're going to rewrite our history, I deserve to be in the room when you erase me." He looked away, jaw tight. Caroline had once been his fiancée. They'd shared years of building the company, of dinners with investors and ribbon cuttings and televised interviews. But their relationship had always felt more like a business merger than love. She leaned in slightly, her voice sharp. "You knew the terms, Michael. No distractions, no unexpected complications. You signed off on that life. I also walked away from it," he said quietly, "because it never felt real." "But the company is real," she snapped. "The investors, the partnerships, the contracts, and now, with your little family reunion, you're risking all of it." Michael folded his arms, his tone measured. "You're here to threaten me, not because you care about the business, because your pride got bruised." Caroline didn't deny it. She just stared at him, then finally pulled out her phone. "I still have the footage, that retreat, the night Grace left, you stumbling into her room." Michael's face paled. "That was nearly a decade ago. You had someone following me?" She smiled coldly. "Insurance, just in case. I never used it. Never had to, until now." He took a step back, disgusted. "What do you want?" he asked bitterly. She tapped her screen, then held it up. "I want a public retraction. I want you to say Grace lied, that Eliza's not yours, that you were manipulated. Or, this goes out, and so does everything else." Inside the house, laughter rang out from the living room, Eliza's voice, pure and innocent. Michael turned back to Caroline, his voice tight with pain. "She's a child." "She's leverage," Caroline corrected. He stared at her for a long moment, then said evenly, "If I had to choose between protecting a company and protecting my daughter's dignity, I'd burn the company to the ground." For the first time, Caroline blinked. "I see," she said finally. "Then I guess we're enemies now." Michael stepped back toward the door. "No, Caroline, we were never really friends." He closed the door behind him, slowly, quietly. Grace was standing at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, eyes searching his face. "Was that who I think it was?" she asked softly. Michael nodded. "She's not done, Grace. She'll come after me. Maybe you. Maybe Eliza." Grace came down the steps and stood beside him, her voice steady. "Then we face it, together." That night, Michael sat beside Eliza's bed, brushing her hair gently with his fingers as she slept. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered, "even if I have to fight everything I once built." Downstairs, his laptop sat open, cursor blinking over a draft of a public statement. He erased the opening line and typed something new. "There are moments in life when a single voice can change your purpose. Mine called me Daddy." The next morning, the sun filtered through half-closed blinds as Michael sat at the kitchen table, his coffee untouched, growing cold by the minute. His laptop was open, but the document on screen wasn't about profits or projections. It was a speech, a different kind of announcement, one that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with heart. Grace entered quietly, holding 2 plates of scrambled eggs and toast. She placed one in front of him, her gaze soft. "Did you sleep?" she asked gently. He shook his head, then looked up at her with tired yet determined eyes. "I couldn't. Not after last night. Not after what Caroline said." Grace pulled out a chair and sat down, folding her hands. "Michael, you don't have to fight this alone." He reached across the table and covered her hands with his. "I know, but I've hidden from the truth for too long. If I want to be in Eliza's life, for real, I have to stop living in the shadows. Grace's voice trembled slightly. Are you sure? This could destroy everything you've built. Michael nodded slowly. Maybe some things deserve to fall, so better ones can rise. Later that afternoon, Eliza burst through the front door, her backpack bouncing behind her. Guess what? I got an A on my science quiz, she beamed, waving the graded paper in the air. Michael knelt down to her level, pride glowing in his eyes. That's amazing, Eliza. I'm so proud of you. She grinned and threw her arms around his neck. I told Mrs. Patterson that you helped me study, she whispered. He chuckled softly, hugging her back. I'm glad I could help. Then he pulled back, looking into her bright eyes. Eliza, how would you feel about coming with me tomorrow? To your office? She asked, tilting her head. To something even bigger. There's going to be cameras and a lot of people, but I want them to meet someone important. She blinked. Who? He smiled gently. You. The next morning, a press conference was held outside the corporate headquarters of Anderson Learning, a towering building of steel and glass in downtown Charlotte. The crowd was large. Reporters lined the barriers, cameras clicking and recording every moment. Employees gathered on the balconies. Everyone expected a new funding announcement, maybe a merger. No one expected what happened next. Michael stepped up to the podium, dressed in a navy blazer and open-collared shirt. Beside him stood Eliza, holding his hand tightly, wearing a white dress with a blue ribbon in her hair. He looked out over the crowd, cleared his throat, and spoke slowly, deliberately. Many of you know me as a builder of schools, of digital tools, of opportunity. He paused, glancing down at Eliza, who looked up at him with quiet trust. But lately, I've realized there was something I never built, something that mattered more than anything else. He took a breath. A home. A hush fell over the crowd. I came to a school ribbon cutting last week expecting to smile, shake hands, and leave. Instead, I heard a voice. A small voice that said one word, a word that shattered me and put me back together. He gently squeezed Eliza's hand. She called me Daddy. Gasps rose from the audience. Cameras flashed faster. I didn't plan this. I didn't expect it. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw a truth I could no longer ignore. He leaned closer to the mic, his voice steady. This is Eliza, my daughter. Reporters shouted questions, but he raised a hand. I don't owe you answers. I owe her a life, a future, a father. He turned to Eliza and knelt beside her. I want you to know, in front of the world, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm yours. Tears welled up in Grace's eyes as she watched from the wings, her hand over her mouth. Michael rose to his feet and looked back at the crowd. I'm starting a new scholarship, one that honors the moment a little girl reminded me what truly matters. He held up a plaque. It's called the One Word Changed Everything Scholarship, for children like Eliza, for families that need a chance, just like I did. The crowd erupted in applause. Later that night, back at home, Eliza curled into Michael's arms on the couch, her voice soft. Daddy, was I brave today? He kissed the top of her head. You were the bravest person in the room. The morning after the press conference, Michael Anderson's office buzzed with congratulatory calls, emails, and flowers. His assistant, Rachel, smiled as she placed a bouquet on his desk. They've been coming non-stop since you left the stage yesterday, she said. You really touched people. Michael nodded, though his gaze was distant. He had barely slept, not because of regret, but because of the storm he felt brewing beneath the applause. A quiet warning whispered in his chest. He didn't have to wait long. By noon, his legal counsel, Tom Keene, stepped into the office holding a crisp manila folder. You might want to sit down for this, Tom said quietly. Michael raised an eyebrow but complied. Tom slid the folder across the desk. It's from Caroline, Michael's ex-fiancée. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter drafted by her attorney. A threat. If you do not retract your public statement and cease all parental claims to Eliza Martin, we will proceed with releasing sensitive material to the press regarding your prior relationship with Ms. Grace Martin, including the timeline overlap with your engagement to Ms. Caroline Hewitt. Michael closed the folder. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. She's trying to destroy me, he said, voice flat. Tom leaned forward, his voice low and measured. You went public, Mike. You made it real. You told the world. That makes you vulnerable. Michael looked out the window, down at the city that once praised his brilliance. Let her try, he said. I'm not hiding anymore. That evening, Grace waited on the porch when Michael pulled up to the house. The tension in her posture said she already knew. He stepped out of the car and met her eyes. She's coming after us, Grace said softly. He nodded. Yes, and I don't care. Grace shook her head. But I do. Not for me, Michael. For Eliza. Her voice cracked as she spoke the next words. I can't let her grow up in the middle of a scandal. Michael's heart ached. He stepped closer, reaching for her hand. I'll protect her. I swear. You can't shield her from everything, she said. But maybe we can give her something solid, something no headline can break. He looked into her eyes. Like what? Grace swallowed. A name. Your name. The next morning, Michael sat across from a social worker in a family services office. The woman, middle-aged with soft eyes and firm posture, reviewed the paperwork. You're seeking full legal guardianship of Eliza Martin? Michael nodded. Yes. Biological paternity has not been established through testing, she stated. That could complicate. She's my daughter, Michael said firmly. And I'll do whatever it takes to prove it. But more than that, I want to be her father. The woman studied him for a long moment. I believe you, she finally said. But public statements are not legal evidence. You'll need to provide documentation. And if there's a challenge from the mother's estate, Grace entered the room holding an envelope. There won't be. She handed it to the social worker. Inside was a notarized letter from Grace, stating that Michael was the biological father and requesting that guardianship be transferred to him in the event of her absence. Michael turned to her, eyes wide. You kept this? He asked. Grace nodded, eyes shining. I wrote it the day Eliza turned 1, just in case. The caseworker reviewed the letter, then set it down gently. This changes things, she said. Later that evening, Michael tucked Eliza into bed. She clutched her favorite stuffed bear, her hair still damp from her bath. Daddy? She asked sleepily. Yes, sweetheart? Did I do something wrong? Michael blinked, startled. No. Why would you think that? 'Cause Mommy's been sad, and you've been serious, like when I spilled grape juice on your laptop. Michael laughed softly, then leaned down and kissed her forehead. No, Eliza, you didn't do anything wrong. You did something amazing. You changed everything. She smiled and closed her eyes, her breathing softening. Michael stayed there a long while, watching her sleep, her tiny hand still holding his finger. He knew there were more battles ahead, more headlines, more legal documents. But for now, in that quiet room with the hum of the night outside, he allowed himself one sacred moment of peace. Because this was what he had been missing. Not a headline, not a title. A heartbeat. A daughter. Michael Anderson sat at the kitchen table long after the house had gone quiet. Eliza was asleep upstairs, and Grace had gone to bed early, drained from the whirlwind of emotion they'd endured over the past few days. The weight of everything hung heavy on his shoulders. Caroline's threat, the sudden legal entanglements, the looming media scrutiny, and beneath it all, the fragile bond he was building with Eliza, a bond he feared could be shattered at any moment. The silence broke when Grace appeared in the doorway. Her robe hung loose, her hair slightly tousled, her expression soft but alert. "You're still up," she said gently. Michael looked up at her, a tired smile tugging at his lips. "Couldn't sleep. My mind won't stop." She walked over and took a seat beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, softly, Grace said, "Do you regret it? Yesterday? The announcement?" He shook his head. "No, I regret not knowing her sooner, but standing on that stage, saying those words, that felt right." Grace reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, grounding. "I want you to know," she said slowly, "I didn't keep her from you out of spite. I was scared. You were about to get married. I didn't want to blow up your life." Michael squeezed her hand. "You didn't blow up my life, Grace. You brought meaning to it. I just wish I'd been there when she took her first steps, when she said her first word." Grace's eyes welled with tears. "It was book. Her first word." She pointed to the shelf and said, "Boo." Michael chuckled, a bittersweet sound. "That's perfect." They sat in silence for a few moments, their hands still linked. Then Grace whispered, "I don't want to do this alone anymore." Michael looked at her, his voice soft and sincere. "You won't." The next day, Michael took Eliza to the park. The air was crisp, golden leaves crunching beneath their feet as they walked hand in hand. "Daddy," she said, skipping a little, "can we go get a hot dog later?" "Only if you promise not to put ketchup on it," he teased. She giggled. "I like mustard better anyway." They reached the pond, and Eliza pulled a sketchbook from her backpack. "Want to see what I drew today?" she asked. "Of course." She opened it to a fresh page, a picture of the school with stick figures in front. One tall, with a tie. One smaller, with pigtails. "That's us," she said proudly. "You came to build the school, but then you found me." Michael's throat tightened. He reached for her, pulling her gently into a hug. "I didn't just find you, Eliza," he murmured. "I found everything I didn't know I needed." Back at the office, Rachel entered Michael's office with a grim look. "There's something you need to see," she said, placing a tablet in front of him. A viral blog post. Photos, gossip headlines. Caroline's camp had leaked a private photo of him and Grace from years ago, along with twisted rumors suggesting Eliza's birth had been hidden to secure financial gain. Michael set the tablet down. He felt the fire rising in his chest, but not for himself, for Eliza, for Grace. "This ends now," he said. Later that week, Michael called a press conference, not for damage control, but for truth. He stood in front of the same school where Eliza first called him Daddy. Reporters swarmed the yard, cameras flashing, microphones pointed. "I won't waste your time with denials," he began. "Yes, I was engaged when Grace and I first crossed paths. Yes, mistakes were made, but the greatest outcome of that mistake was my daughter." He paused, scanning the crowd. "She's not a headline. She's not leverage. She's an 8-year-old girl who deserves to grow up knowing she's loved and protected, not exploited." The murmurs stilled. Michael continued, his voice unwavering. "If you want to question someone, question me. I failed to be there when it mattered, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving." As the press conference ended, a ripple of applause broke out, not orchestrated, not expected, just honest. Back at home, Eliza ran into his arms. "You were brave," she whispered. Michael kissed the top of her head. You make me brave. That night, as Grace tucked Eliza into bed, Michael watched from the hallway. The soft light cast long shadows on the wall. He felt a sense of stillness, like the kind that comes just before dawn. He knew more storms might come. He knew Caroline wasn't finished. But in that moment, with the scent of bedtime lotion in the air, the sound of Eliza's sleepy voice drifting from the room, and Grace looking up at him with that quiet strength in her eyes, he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And for the first time in years, Michael Anderson didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a father. The days that followed the press conference felt like the eye of a storm. Still, fragile, almost too calm. Michael walked into the boardroom that Monday morning with his head held high. The same executives who once whispered behind his back now offered tight nods and forced smiles. His company's stocks had dipped slightly, but public opinion? It leaned in his favor. Not because he played it safe, but because, for once, he told the truth. Rachel closed the door behind him and gave a small, approving nod. You did the right thing, Michael. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I hope Eliza remembers that someday. Not the mess, just the honesty. She will, Rachel said softly. Kids remember the love, not the headlines. Later that week, Eliza clutched a stack of papers to her chest as she ran into Michael's office. Daddy, she called out breathlessly. Miss Holly said we could write about our heroes. Michael smiled. And who did you choose? She shyly unfolded the page and held it up. There, in colorful crayon letters, it read, My hero is my dad. Below, a drawing of him holding her hand. A cape floated behind his back. Her smile was wide. His was crooked, just like in real life. Michael reached for the paper like it was made of glass. Eliza, he whispered. You don't have to say anything, she said quickly. I just wanted you to see it. But he couldn't stay silent. He knelt beside her, his voice trembling with emotion. This is the greatest award I've ever received. She threw her arms around his neck, holding him tight. Then I guess we're both heroes. That night, as he tucked her in, Eliza said something that lodged deep in his soul. You know what I liked most about the school opening? Michael leaned in. What? That when I said Daddy, you didn't run away. He kissed her forehead. Never. Not from you. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the house, Grace sat alone, flipping through an old photo album. She paused at a picture from 9 years ago, one where she and Michael stood together during a corporate retreat, smiles soft, eyes unaware of what the future would hold. Michael walked in, holding 2 mugs of tea. Memory lane? He asked gently. She nodded. I almost forgot this one existed. He looked at the photo for a long time. We look young. We were. A pause. Then Grace asked, What happens next? Michael exhaled slowly. We build. Slowly. Honestly. Whatever shape this becomes, we build it together. Grace smiled. That sounds a lot like a foundation. The next morning, Michael stood before the board of trustees at his company. He wasn't here to pitch a product or defend a scandal. He was here to propose something new. I want to launch a scholarship, he said clearly. It'll be called One Word Changed Everything. It's for children who grow up without fathers, biological or present. Kids who need a hand, a chance, just like Eliza gave me. There were murmurs, some skeptical, others moved. But when he finished, the vote was unanimous. Approved. That evening, Eliza helped him design the first flyer. What colors should we use? He asked. Blue and gold, she answered, like your tie and the sun. Michael grinned. Perfect choice. She paused, looking thoughtful. Can we add a line at the bottom? Of course. What should it say? She scribbled it carefully. tongue poking from the corner of her mouth. He came to build a school, but found his home. Michael stared at the words for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, we can." As the printer whirred, Eliza leaned against him. "I think we make a good team," she said. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "The best team." The chapter wasn't finished, not by a long shot. But the hardest part, the reckoning, the truth, the choice to show up, had already been made. And in the heart of that choice, Michael Anderson had discovered something far greater than success. He'd found a purpose. He'd found his child. He'd found his way back to himself. Saturday morning sunlight poured gently through the windows of Eliza's art classroom. Laughter and whispers filled the room as brushes swept across canvas and tiny fingers shaped clay with care. It was the final day of the school's art week, something Michael had quietly funded through his foundation, letting Eliza's teacher take the credit. He wanted the joy to belong fully to the children. Michael stood in the back, hands in his pockets, watching Eliza from a distance. She was at the front of the room, a small easel before her, head bent in concentration. Her long brown hair was pulled back with a clip shaped like a tiny book, something Grace had bought for her at a street market last week. "She hasn't looked up once," Grace whispered beside him, smiling. Michael leaned in slightly. "That means she's building a masterpiece." Grace chuckled softly, her voice warm. "Or she's trying to get the ears right. She's a perfectionist when it comes to ears." Just then, Eliza turned around and waved eagerly. "Daddy, come see." Michael walked up, his heart beating a little faster. It was just a drawing, just paper and color, but something told him it would be more than that. Eliza stepped aside proudly, revealing a painting in soft pastels. It showed a tall man kneeling beside a little girl. They were standing in front of the new school building, ribbons still tied across the front doors. But that wasn't the part that made Michael freeze. It was the words written in neat, bold letters across the top. He came to build a school, but found his home. Michael swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Grace stepped closer, her hand gently touching his back. Eliza looked up at him, her eyes hopeful. "Do you like it?" He knelt down, pulling her gently into a hug. "I love it," he whispered, "more than anything I've ever built." The room around them faded for a moment. No other voices, no laughter, just the quiet beat of a father's heart finally steady, finally whole. Later that evening, the three of them sat around the dinner table in Grace's small but cozy apartment. Candlelight flickered as Eliza told a wild, exaggerated version of her art project, complete with silly voices and made-up parts. Michael laughed freely, head thrown back, no business calls to take, no titles to defend. He was simply Dad, and it felt right. After Eliza had gone to bed, Grace lingered at the table. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was soft, familiar. "I still remember the first night I found out," Grace said gently, fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. Michael nodded. "You didn't have to do it alone." "I know," she said, "but I wasn't ready to risk everything." He reached across the table, gently placing his hand over hers. "I can't change the past, but I promise you, Grace, I will never disappear again." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Good," she whispered, "because Eliza, she's all in. And now, so am I." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe, just maybe, we can all find our way forward, not as strangers or regrets, but as something new." She smiled through her tears. "As a family." Months later, at the school's dedication ceremony for the new scholarship fund, Eliza stood proudly at the microphone. "This school used to be just a building," she said, her voice clear and confident. "But now, it's where kids like me feel seen, because someone believed we mattered." She turned to Michael, who stood beside her, and grinned. "My dad taught me that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear suits, and sometimes they just show up." The crowd laughed and then applauded. Michael reached down and held her hand. He had given money. He had built buildings. But in the